In early 1988, this song went to #1, and it became the signature hit for a legendary band with closets full of hits and memorable songs. Not bad for a song that was written on a crappy little 8-track machine while a taxi was honking impatiently while its co-writer tried to finish it so he wouldn't miss his plane to Hong Kong to write with the iconic lead singer, who listened to it when he got there and wrote the memorable lyrics in just a few minutes. This is one of the most entertaining song stories ever, with the actual co-writer here to tell us the story next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you used to order something by mail as a kid, and that standard 6 to 8 weeks it took to get the item shipped to you seemed more like a 10-year prison stretch, you're going to love this channel of nostalgia. Make sure that you subscribe below. Check the box to never miss out on our interviews, our videos, the history of music. It's a time machine every single day. And make sure to check out our Patreon for our new behind-the-scenes series that's starting there. So it's time for another episode of our series Revelations, where artists and bands give us a really unique insight into their greatest songs and albums. These are stories that you will not find anywhere else. Today, we have a truly underappreciated songwriting legend, Andrew Farriss from INXS, the man who co-wrote most of the hit song catalog with the late frontman Michael Hutchence. Farriss is a jack-of-all-trades musician who can play almost everything, and his chemistry with Michael Hutchence was the primary force that resulted in 5 top 10 hits in a 4-year period, including their only #1 hit, Need You Tonight. Kick was just such a classic album. And Need You Tonight is a song that may not have even seen the light of day if not for Andrew, talking a cab driver into waiting for him as he was trying to take him to the airport to catch a flight to Hong Kong to write for Kick. Inspiration hit him at the most inopportune moment, but it came, and how this song came about is truly fascinating. Stories coming up next. Now, as we go into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. They support our mission of keeping the music alive. Right now, when you go to Zenni.com, you can get a pair of glasses for $6.95. I'm not even kidding you. You can choose from numerous styles, colors, and shapes. Go to Zenni.com and get your pair today, and make sure to add some amazing features. I've told you a lot about it. Blue blocks, you got to do it. Here's Andrew with the story. You had to know some of these songs were definitely hits after What You Need, like Need You Tonight. That had to be a no-brainer for you. You had to know that was a hit. Because, in the U.S., it hit #1. It was #2 in Canada, Ireland, the U.K., #3 in Australia, New Zealand. Tell me about that, the story of writing that, what you remember.
Well, for such a massive hit, I hate to tell you this, it was so easy to write. There was no, sweating and that we'd done on previous writes, and afterwards we sweated a lot too. But that song was ridiculous. I was going to write with Michael, who was living in Hong Kong at that point. I was living in Sydney, and I had a little 8-track back then, analog tape recorder, and I had a drum machine. I was working on the riffs and stuff, and then I looked at my watch and realized that I was running out of time. I had to go to get a cab to go to the airport to fly to Hong Kong to meet Michael to keep writing Kick, Well, the cab turns up and I'm panicking, realizing I'm in the middle of something I think is very important, like you said, and I'm tracking this thing like a mother. I'm going, ding, 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 and I'm programming stuff and playing or whatever. And the cab driver I keep running out going, just wait a minute. And he could see me playing and fiddling with this thing. And he almost drove off, and then I just grabbed, I think, a cassette of it in the end. I just did a real quick, really rough mix of what I had. And, and I turned up with it in Hong Kong and drove straight to the Watson Cedar Heart estate in Hong Kong. And when I got there, the concierge, I didn't know any Chinese. I said, I got to go over the Watson Cedar Heart estate. Okay. I said, but I don't know how to speak Chinese. He goes, just give him this. And it was the word ting, T-I-N-G, which I think means stop. Okay. Well, he jumps in this cab with me and my cassette, and he starts roaring up this hill. And I'm like, that's the wrong direction, mate, you know? And so I give him this word ting. So he stops and just throws me out of the cab. Anyway, I got another cab and I'll go back down the hill and over to this estate building. And I get there, and Michael's sitting there, and there's a very talented engineer in there as well. And he had a Fairlight keyboard, which is a very cool keyboard. Yeah, and I was like, wow, because I'd never even used one before. And I played the demo I have, Need You Tonight, which is basically what the recording is kind of like.
There's something about you, girl, makes me sweat.
And Michael goes, that's great. And he grabs it and he gives me 5 minutes. And he wrote lyrics straight out. I know. But weird. That's weird, right?
Jeez.
Like, I saw him write it out, right? I'm like, wow, you know. And then he walks in the vocal booth and just sings it just like that. That's the first vocal that he did, is what you're hearing, right? Weird, you know. And then we added the keyboard parts, myself and the engineer, you know, helped me with like the sounds of that. And I love the keys on that, you know, the sound that the guy helped me get was fantastic. And then that's virtually what went on the record, was that recording that we did. Yeah, Chris heard it, Chris Thomas, and went, what's that? And we said, oh, that's what we've been tracking in Hong Kong. He goes, I want the tape. So we got the 2-inch tape, and we added that to Kick. It's part of the recording of it, was what we did in Hong Kong, Michael and I. And yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. You know, it was sort of just, I couldn't make up a stranger story, I don't think. It was how that came together. It was bizarre, you know.
So you're sitting there and you play, you're supposed to go to Hong Kong, the dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, and all of the movement from the 1 to the 4 back again, and then the stops and the starts and little breaks. And because I was programming it so fast, I didn't realize I'd put 5 bars instead of 4 bar, the normal 4-bar cycle. I put a 5th bar in there. And I've told people all these years later, if you want to catch people's attention on the radio, don't do even bars of 4, 8, and 16. Put an odd bar in there here and there. Because people don't, right? Because you're so used to listening to the radio, and there's these nice, even little sections of bars that roll by, that the listener has almost gotten used to or comfortable with the idea of nice little sections of 4, 8, or 16 bars. But if there's suddenly a 5th bar or a 7th bar or a 9th bar or whatever it is, you know, a 3rd bar or something that's not supposed to be there in that sense, you subconsciously you'll go, what was that? Because you're not used to the idea of that coming at you.
Well, I mean, there's a number of tracks, the layered guitar, the drum tracks. How did you approximate the sound on the recorded track?
Right. Well, when we constructed it at speed originally, when we deconstructed it at the other end in Sydney, we worked out as a group, you know, and with Chris Thomas as a producer, how we'd approach it, you know, and Chris liked the simple, you know, Roland 707 drum program that I'd programmed in. He liked it and he wanted to keep that. So John, my brother, the drummer, you know, he worked around that and it was great. He added certain percussion fills and tom things or whatever.
Rim shots.
Yeah, that's right. You know, to give it a little bit of highlight from a percussive thing. It's great. And the same with, I mean, you know, what everyone played on that thing was just so right. Really was just right.
Like the stops and the starts and even like the call and the response, the background vocals when he goes, I'm lonely. And then his vocal, just him totally a cappella. I'm lonely. That's so great.
I'm lonely.
Yeah, I agree. You know, Michael, I mean, Bono once said to me, well, he said a few things to me, but we were talking about Michael, the two of us once, and it might have been before he passed away, actually. And I had never met Bono before. And I was talking to him and he said, no, I won't try and do his accent, you know, but he said, one of the things I really love about Michael is you know, I have to be Mephisto, and I put my wraparound glasses on, and I go out there and I take on this persona and character, and I get in character and I go in to deliver that. That guy, being Michael, is the real thing. He's like your Jim Morrison. That's the way he is. And I said, yeah, I know. I get it. I understand. You know, You're not going to change the creature that he is. He's not going to put on any face, or that's just who he is. You know, that about sums it up. You know, and that's the part of Michael that he flew so high, but he flew so low too as a person. You know what I mean? Like he hit the ground because he's like a dragon in that sense. You know, he kind of like immortal. He thought of himself as like just, you know, his mind was always on, you know, on 12. You know, incredible guy.
So raw, got to let you know. Got to let you know. You one of my kind, yeah.
And his vocal on that is exactly who he is, because like we were listening to the other day and my wife's like, oh my gosh, he's got the sexiest voice in the world.
Well, there you go. Well, keep playing it, you know.
Yeah, I know.
It's going to make your wife happy. Hey, man, keep playing it.
That's exactly right. But he could just do that. He could do that so well. And the way that you guys set up the vocals, the call and the response, was that something that was done after you recorded that initial track that you were saying, or did you kind of come up with that right there when you showed him the song?
I think, like I was saying before, I think Michael vocally, he just naturally did all of that stuff. And I'm not sure, but I could be wrong. He may have overdubbed some of his vocal later on. I mean, I'm sure Kirk or someone else in my band, you know, Kirk is very detail orientated, which is what makes him such an amazing musician too. It's Kirk technically is an incredible musician. In INXS, amazing. But he's also a bit of a tech nerd with what happened when with who, you know. Whereas if you ask me, I'm like, yeah, I think it was like that, you know. Whereas he's absolutely positive that it was, you know. But ask him. But I don't know, man. To me, I think Michael might have overdubbed some of his vocals, but I know he cut the original idea for that song. I remember sitting there listening to it. It's virtually what's on the record. I remember thinking that. Yeah.
Well, synchronizing it with Mediate too. Tell me about that, because that's a poem that you wrote.
Hallucinate to segregate, mediate, alleviate, try not to hate.
Okay.
Right.
Well, right. Well, talking about songwriting for a minute, we were doing a tour to promote the Listen Like Thieves album, the album before Kick. And we'd been in Europe, and we'd had a very successful tour. And we were on a bus in Germany, I think. And I remember that we had talked, Michael and I, to the other guys in the band openly, saying, you know, look, I know, you know, a band is a band, and everyone within the band are artists in their own right. You guys can all write to a certain degree on your own or with other people, and we respect that. Would you guys consider letting Michael and I write all the songs on this album? Because if you give us a shot at this, we will give you a monster of an album, is what we said to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you give us the keys to the car, we'll give you the right album. Yeah. And they did.
And they trusted. That's awesome.
Yeah. And that trust in that idea that they had of letting go of their ego or their own self-worth or whatever, in that sense, to me was an amazing moment. I remember, and that made it even more important to Michael and I to deliver that for everybody, because they'd given us that trust level. You know, it wasn't a case of competition or, you know, the normal kind of band dynamic that can often go on with insecurity and people being jealous or unsure of their own position or their art's not being heard. All that was gone. It was like Michael and I just had this beautiful silver highway in front of us, you know? We had a great band, you know, to record this stuff, great record producer, you know, a label that were, and, you know, even though we talked a bit about that, was still keen on us. It was just having the keys to like a spaceship in one sense, you know. We were really lucky people.
Well, and synchronizing it with Mediate too, that's what was made that a song that's not only a hit, but all these years later, it's like a masterpiece because it's these two songs together that if you bought the Kick album, you really couldn't think of one without the other, even though Need You Tonight was the big single and everything. But the music video, of course, a whole other story. But tell me about Mediate synchronizing that.
Right. Well, Michael and I decided to write Kick together, like all the songs, but we also had come up with the idea of I would write a song by myself and he would write a song by himself. 2 songs on the record, right? His song was Guns in the Sky that he wanted to write about, about Star Wars, and then my song was Mediate. And what I wanted to do with that was have a kind of a more ambient, almost hip hop groove running in the background, but not aggressive, nothing aggressive about it, just gentle. And the idea with the lyric is everything had to rhyme with one word. And I set that goal for myself to try to write a lyric where everything has to end in 8, and so that was my idea for Mediate, and Michael's idea for Guns in the Sky was the Star Wars thing. I think with 6 guys in a band, it was always a lot of dudes anyway to have in a group, and it was, and Michael being such a charismatic person, it was right that he was always front and center most videos and whatever he did, and he deserved that accolade.
What did you think of the finished thing when you saw it? Because it was different than any video on MTV.
Yeah, no, I know. I think that's one of the things that was very good about the way that Richard Lowenstein and Michael in particular were a bit of an art house between themselves like that. They would talk visual stuff, and I think Michael actually felt in some ways more comfortable talking about visual stuff than he did about music with me, because he didn't really understand, music theory, but he did understand visual, he understood that really well, the idea of visual, he had that stuff down, both on stage and with the video and film.
Well, this is a song also so used in pop culture. I mean, you had 30 Rock. It was used in Black Mirror. I don't know if you saw how they used it in Black Mirror.
Right.
And Coyote Ugly.
95.
Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day was used in. Top Gear. Bonnie Raitt covered it too, though. Did you ever hear her version of it?
Yeah, actually, I had met Bonnie previously through Ricky Fatah, her drummer and music MD, and a great guy, great drummer, great band of people. And I'd worked with Ricky for years before that on a record I was producing for an artist in Australia called Johnny Morris. Anyway, but when Bonnie covered Need You Tonight, I knew about it. And when I was in Nashville, I went with Marlena, my wife. We went to the Bridgestone amphitheater there, and she walked out on stage, and second or third song in, she says, "Oh, Andrew Farriss is in the audience here tonight." And I nearly fell over. I'm like, "Hey, that's me." She's talking about it, and she introduces Need You Tonight. She goes, she's brilliant. Bonnie's brilliant. And, I went back afterwards and I talked to her and my friend Gordon Kennedy was there as well. Great songwriter, legendary. I was there with those guys, chatting with them and with Ricky and her band, and I said, "I appreciate you doing the song, and you're doing it great, and we really love it." And she took me aside. She said, "Write me a song," she says to me. Okay. So Gordon and I wrote a song, and we gave it to her, but I didn't know if she's going to do it anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, but she's great, Bonnie. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, she's amazing. What's the song's legacy meant to you as we kind of wrap up on Need You Tonight all these years later? Coming up with that prominent, again, prominent guitar part that you always come up with on these amazing songs.
Thank you. I sort of, what I do is I keep playing these riffs, you know, like probably the way I played it originally wasn't exactly the way it ended up on the record. Like, in other words, sometimes when I'm playing them, I'll start off in one area and then I'll realize, yeah, that's pretty good, but it's better like this. And then I'll change it really subtly to move it around a little bit. And that could be the tempo. It might be the, you know, just the way I'm playing it on the guitar or whatever. And to their credit, you know, especially Tim and Kirk, you know, the guitar players in INXS, they would pick up on these riffs, and they didn't try to, you know, to chop them up or mess them up. They'd play my riffs off in the way I wrote them, and I really appreciate that.
You know, I've got to let you know, you're one of my kind. With gentle eyes, and you're good to me. Yes,
I'm working on what I call my sort of cowboy country and western rock is what I'm doing, and with other flavors of music thrown in. And I'm kind of set my tone, you know. I decided to make myself a kind of fictitious character in my own head that's somewhere between like a prospector or a guy from, say, 1880 through to about steampunk, like late 20s. I could be an aging Wyatt Earp or something. And then the kind of character I am, all my songs as I've started to work on and write have given me guidelines of how to write my own albums and how to position myself within the country music world as well. Because those instruments, you got to remember, from 1880 to about steampunk, there was no electricity or very primitive. You know, you would have had a very rough jazz guitar with a pickup in it. But most of the instruments that they would have been recording with were basically classical instruments, or had been taken and reused as folk instruments like banjos and fiddles and mandolins and all these instruments, upright pianos and all that would have been in old saloons and things. And I set that as a tone for how I want to record and write my own music, because I simply wanted to do it to have fun. I want to have fun with myself and not take myself too seriously and say, well, maybe I'll write this song about, how a cowboy felt when he was, he was attracted to some Cajun girl, and out of New Orleans. Or how would I feel when, say in Australian history, there was a bushranger, an outlaw guy called Ned Kelly. How would I feel about wanting to be part of his gang if I was alive back then? How would I feel? You know what I mean? And so that gives me the bounce off. I still enjoy co-writing with other guys or girls, but it's not that. In fact, I've written a lot more with women since Michael passed away, which I really enjoyed too, I got to say. But I got to say that for me, writing by myself now, I'm really enjoying creating this kind of fictitious character about myself.
Where did this come from? Because I'm fascinated by this music.
Yeah.
I've been listening to it the last couple of days. And
Yeah.
I love it because it kind of sounds like outlaw older country, but it's also got a modern feel to it. That's what I like about it, because I love country. My grandpa, I grew up Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and George Jones.
Right.
So I love it. I'm fascinated by it. And I'm just curious, where did that come from? Because this is very different. It's a good different. It's awesome.
Good. Thank you. I really appreciate that, because I've been kind of paranoid about how people were going to, receive this stuff, or if they thought it was crap or not. I don't know.
No.
Oh, good. I really appreciate that. I really thank you. And but I was going to say that my modus operandi, if you like, for this thing, again, I'm trying to always be a bit cheeky about it. That's why I've worked along with Marlena, my wife. We've worked real hard on videos and the stylization of it, with artwork and everything. It's very stylized in one sense, where I deliberately have gone down the road of trying to be, but being a little like you just said is a good way to put it, and with old school music in a new style front end, because I feel that you got to remember that all of those guys, your Willie Nelsons, your Johnny Cashes, Hank Williams, Roy Rogers, all these early guys and girls, women, a lot of them, you know, they wanted to be cowboys or cowgirls. You know, they didn't want to look, you know, not there's anything wrong with that, but they didn't want to look like a trucker, you know, because there was no trucks. They rode horses and they rode around. That was the fantasy when they, I guess, when they were young. Is it, you know, I mean, that's why Willie Nelson often sings about he wanted to be a cowboy. He didn't want to, you know, and I think that's the part of it that I get. I get that, is that, you know, and I think there's also, I'll just say culturally, we are becoming, in our technological world, it seems to be getting more and more technologically driven. You and I are talking on technology that would have been unimaginable 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
You know, right now, the technology we're talking on has created a different world, in a sense. But I think some basic things still apply. And by that I mean, you can't eat a smartphone.
Yep.
We need to eat food and fresh water. That hasn't changed from 100 years ago. You still need to get from A to B. If there was no more petrol anymore, you'd probably get on a horse, you know.
That's right.
Some things, right? Some things never change, you know. They're always going to be that way as long as there's horses, you know. But the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, there are still plenty of people out in the areas where we live, you know. My family lives out, you know, in a farming community. People still ride horses for a living, and they still do jobs. They muster cattle, you know, they round up cattle on horseback, and they do these things, and we still grow food. We grow our own vegetables. You know, I grow food, oats and millet and barley for people to consume, to eat. That hasn't changed from 100 years ago. So I started thinking, why not write like the guys wrote back then? Because some things will never change, you know.
Leave us a comment about this incredible song by INXS with legendary vocalist Michael Hutchence. What are your memories of this song? And Andrew Farriss, what a great guy. Kick, one of the greatest albums ever. Let us know your memories and your feelings below. Let's have a great discussion. Now, if you like our content, you like this video, we would love to have you subscribe. Hit the bell and check the box so you don't miss out on any of our interviews. And hit Patreon as well. We have a new series there. I know you're going to like it. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Talk to you soon.